What are the coolest psychology tricks that you know or have used? If you have trouble motivating yourself to do something like learn a skill, instrument, language, etc., tell yourself, okay, I'll sit down and do this for just 5 minutes. A lot of the time you'll end up going for much longer than 5 minutes, but even if you don't, it's still 5 minutes of practice in whatever the heck you wanted to learn in the first place. If someone won't stop talking or let you get a word in, drop something, keys, pen. Reach down to pick them up and start talking. It's a way to interrupt without the other person realizing it. When something funny happens and people or a person in a group laughs, they will look at the person they like or care about in the group the most to see if they're laughing too. When you notice this, it's quite easy to tell who likes who. If you want to calm someone down, sympathize with them whilst describing what's upsetting them in descending orders of magnitude. I understand why you're angry, you're right to be frustrated, this would annoy me too. As they accept the acknowledgements they should also accept the declining emphasis on emotion and become calmer. The flinch. Whether you're negotiating a raise, the sale price of a car you want to buy, who does what chores around the house, always flinch visibly at the first and sometimes second offers. The flinch can be as simple as a small wince, a sigh, or an eye roll. The flinch quite often causes people to lowball the initial offer. I learned this from my husband and it freaking works. I got my current job at 10% over the max salary because I flinched. When you need someone to wait a moment as you hunt for something, or you're struggling, say, thank you for your patience, instead of, sorry for the wait. It subtly strokes their ego and makes them more likely to be kind and patient with you, because you've already asserted, the kind and patient people, and denying that would hurt their own self-image. Works with most people, but some are just raging assholes lol. If someone is talking or preoccupied, you can hold out your hand and they'll give you whatever they're holding. I did it to my sister with the car keys and made her think she lost them somewhere at the store. I had a very strange encounter with a coworker once. We were on a break, had chatted a bit, the usual mundane, are you married, etc., do you have kids, and when I said no, she waited, staring at me, for me to continue. Boy did that ever work, the longer she stared the more I babbled, I couldn't stop talking. I'd finish a sentence, she kept staring and I'd start talking again, and not because she was politely listening. She was compelling me to talk. I have no idea why she did that, if it was just her way or if she does that to learn things about people, but it was the creepiest conversation I have ever had. I'm older now so that wouldn't work on me, but it sure was effective at the time. The concept of getting something for free completely derails a person's critical thinking skills. My dad was a tool distributor and drove a truck to various repair shops selling tools to mechanics. He got an idea to start selling candy bars on his truck for $1. But you would get a free candy bar with every tool purchase. Almost everyone who asked how much the candy bar was didn't want to pay $1 for one, but they would buy a $100 socket set in order to get the candy bar for free. My favorite is silently maintaining eye contact when a person is attempted to bargain or convince you of something that you don't want to do, or don't believe. They usually end up negotiating with themselves, which gives you a huge advantage because once that happens, it is pretty much game over. I used the grey rock method on my narcissist brother-in-law. Basically, I made myself so dull and boring and the opposite of drama that he learned to avoid me at all costs. It worked like a charm and only took 4 to 5 encounters to take effect. Many people, I would say most, maybe almost all, are surprisingly susceptible to flattery and being told what they want to hear. People tend to shy away from this strategy, thinking it will be too obvious and clumsy, but just try it. It's as if being flattered or hearing people agree with you gives people a rush of pleasurable hormones to the brain. If you work with clients, prevent them from getting defensive and angry by not using the word you. It's not, you didn't send the attachment, it's the attachment didn't send. Don't blame them, blame the thing you're talking about. I take my time when I write emails to clients because I like to word things just right. One word can be the difference between a happy client and an unhappy one. The right words in the right order can influence people to make decisions you want them to make. Words are powerful. In an argument, speak softly. It forces active listening, which leads to active thinking. When they are listening and thinking, they are not yelling, arguing, or talking. The best one for kids, and this works wonders for behavioral problems. You never say, don't do X. I had a terror child in daycare and people would yell at him for acting out. I would start each day by saying, you're going to be a good boy today. And every time he acted out, I would say, wait, you're my good boy, right? He would say yes and stop doing it. When his mom came to get him, I made a point of telling her how good he was. That child never acted out around me after a week. The Socratic method. It's not exactly a psychological hack, but it's a useful technique for dealing with people, usually in arguments. The basic idea is to ask your opponent questions when you're arguing with them. Whereas normally you'd be building points to support your own argument or looking for flaws in their points, you can instead force them to start tearing it down themselves. People usually place more value on an opinion if they came to it on their own rather than if someone else tried to convince them. It's a natural bias. I came to this conclusion myself, so I know it makes sense to my brain. If you ask them questions, this forces them to test their ideas on their own and see if they hold up. This is especially easy because even in regular conversation, asking questions is just a generally good tactic for maintaining flow. I'm a good listener, and folks usually think of listeners as people who aren't as strong at influencing others. But you'd be surprised how well you can convince people just by letting them discover their own fallacies and then being prepared with an alternative viewpoint. You want someone you just met to like you. Ask them open-ended questions about themselves. Don't wait for your turn to speak. Listen, and then ask a follow-up question based on what they said. If you do that a couple of times, that person feels heard and appreciated by you. If they realize they're doing all the talking, they'll apologize and ask a question of you. If your answer is short and pivots back into something they said, you have now formed a connection in their mind as a good listener who is interested in what they have to say. People like that a lot. If I want my cat to jump up for cuddles, I first have to act totally disinterested and like I don't care what he does. Works every time. You can end a lot of arguments with a simple, I understand what you're saying. It validates them while you maintain your position. Kids do well with forced decisions. Don't say, go brush your teeth, say you can brush your teeth before or after a story. It gives them the impression that it's their choice. Works every time. I was always a fan of being aware of the Benjamin Franklin effect. If you give someone something or do them a favor, you're much more likely to do it again in the future. Being aware of it keeps people from taking advantage of you. To get someone to like you more, ask them to do a favor for you, like let you borrow a pencil. Benjamin Franklin was a big proponent of this idea. When playing rock, paper, scissors, stop right before and ask, without looking, can you tell me what color your shirt is? And people seem to always pick scissors after. I've done it to maybe 20 people and got the same result every time. When things are quiet amongst a group of people, all I have to do is say, uh-oh, and everyone suddenly becomes intensely curious about what is going on. I find it best to exit stage left-right about that time. Make people think you're a terrible liar by purposely being caught in goofy small lies. It makes it easier if you ever get into a situation where you are forced to lie. Silence. I have found that saying nothing is often the most powerful tool of negotiation. I once sold a car with 350,000 miles on it for my asking price, because when the guy was walking around it and pointing out the flaws, I never said a word. He talked and talked, and I never responded. Finally, he talked himself right into buying the car. I would have gone down $1,500, but he never demanded an answer out of me. My brother was the master of this. Whenever he got in an argument with a topic he couldn't win, he would ever so slightly change what he was arguing until he was arguing something completely different. Nobody would ever notice. Like one time he got in an argument with his girlfriend over him never doing the dishes. By the end of the argument, 45 minutes later, they were fighting over how she usually gets to pick the movie when they go to the movies. I'm just sitting in the next room laughing my ass off. The girlfriend did the dishes later that night and apparently let him pick the next couple of movies. The trick to winning an argument is to convince the other person that the whole thing is a misunderstanding and that you were actually saying the same thing the whole time. Instead of arguing in favor of your point, you ask them questions on their point of view and lead them. Giving students in my elementary class the illusion of choice. If you ask, do you want to start your work, or isn't it time we got something done, I modify it to, would you like to do your assignment with a pencil or blue pen? They are too consumed with this choice that they have forgotten that they didn't want to do it in the first place. Also, every recess, did you push Jimmy? No, okay, 2 people saw you do it and reported it to me. Are you sure you didn't? And sure, then change it to, can you tell me why you pushed him? Well, it's because, gets them every time. The primacy effect, you're more likely to remember the first item on a list, and the recency effect, you're more likely to remember the last item on a list. If I'm listing groceries for my husband, I make the most important items into bookends. If I'm talking to the parent of one of my students about their kid's behavior, I always list good, bad, good. They get the information about the bad, but what they remember about the conversation is how they felt good and saw that I care about their kid. Have a toddler that is in a bad mood. Sit down with them, look them straight in the eye, and say, you're mad, so don't laugh, just keep repeating it as seriously as you can. I've done it for 15 different cousins over a couple of decades, and by the 5th repetition of don't laugh, they are busting a gut and rolling on the floor.